Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This morning we are going to look at the mortality measures. Last time we were discussing about fertility, so this time we are going to look at the mortality measures. So, number one, mortality. It measures the deaths that people or the country can actually have. And this particular deaths, it means that people are dying, and they are subjected to issues related to death. So that is the modality, and we normally have got different measures that can measure mortality. The first one is called crude death rate, which normally looks at death over median population multiplied by the radix. So the radix can be 1,000 or it can be 10,000, depending on the weighting factors for that. For example, we can actually have the number of deaths in an area could be 509, 430, and the median population for that particular part, median population, it can be 31 million and 754 times 10 to the power 6. Let's assume that this is actually the population. So in this case, we can actually say crude death rate is equal to D is equal to this one, 530, and the 31, 754 times 10 to the power 6, and this one you multiply by 1000, so that when you cancel, you can get 16.0 death per 1000 population. So this is the crude death rate, and this is actually the basic measure of mortality. Now the other measure of mortality is actually what we discussed in fertility, which is called age specific death, age specific death rates. Now on the age specific death rate, we actually look at the age death of the people by an age category. Death of the people by age category. For example, we can actually have an age group 15 to 19, and we can have the median population, and we can have the deaths. So that here we can have 20 to 24, we can actually have the deaths, and you can have 25 to 29, we can have the values. So here we can actually say D over P multiplied by K, and then we can be able to get the values Y1, Y2, Y3. So this is obtained after dividing this value over this one. So these figures we are getting at this particular level, we call them specific death rates. So we call them specific death rates. And normally, this is actually the better way we can be able to calculate the number of deaths that are experienced in a particular area. Okay, having said that, I want us now to look at the what we call calendar year rates, and at the same time cohort rates. So sometimes you can have calendar year rates. Mostly we target the infant mortality. Now on the calendar year of infant mortality. Now infant mortality, to begin with, this is actually the measure of deaths among children. The measure of deaths among children. Now in most of the countries, infant mortality rate is actually a proxy measure. It's a proxy measure of standard of living. So So a proxy measure of standard of living, because we believe that if children are not dying quite a lot, it means that the population is able to take care of the children, and that particular population is an advanced population. That's why you see that most developing countries, mortality rates of the children is actually very high. Why? Is because of poverty, standard of living is very small, and because the standard of living is very small, a lot of people, they actually die. So it is again another measure which can be useful indicator to actually measure like a state of health of the population. So for you to get the state of health of a population, living standard, and number 3, you can actually look at the it has a like number 3, it can measure state of health, it can measure living standard, and at the same time it can measure the well-being of the society. So this is why the ratios are defined to be very important and quite critical, because it can affect the entire population, because when people have died at the beginning of their life, then those particular people can end up kill the whole population can die. So in terms of the calendar year, we have got the first one, which is called the neonatal mortality rate, and we have got the other one, which is actually called postnatal mortality rate, and we have got the other one, which is actually called perinatal mortality rate. Now, in terms of the neonate, a neonate, this one is an infant less than 4 weeks. So the death of an infant 28 days less over the number of children that were born, whom we call them as live birth, multiplied by 1,000. This figure multiplied by 1,000, then this one we actually call them neonatal. So any death of a child less than 4 weeks is called a neonatal death, whereby on the other side we have got the other mortality, which is called the postnatal. Now this one, you look at the infant age between exactly 4 weeks to less than 1 year. Okay, or it can be in a year there are 54 weeks, so it can be between 4 to 54 weeks, like that, this particular period divided by the life birth. And this again you multiply by a radix, so that when we call it radix, so that when explaining them you are using per 1,000. So this is actually post neonatal. And then perinatal mortality. Perinatal, peri means outside that particular natal period. So you actually look at the late fetal death and the plus infant mortality under 4 weeks. Okay, this one divided by live birth multiplied by the whole of this 1,000. So this one is actually referred to as the perinatal. So we call them calendar mortality rates, because they are referring to time, all of them. So I want you to understand properly. Now let's look at the, I've mentioned something like a fetal death. Now fetal death is actually defined as the death, okay, prior to expansion, okay, or extraction from the mother, okay, a product of conception. a product of conception irrespective of duration of pregnancy. Irrespective of duration of pregnancy. So when that happens like that, we actually call that one as a fatal death. So we actually call that one as a fatal death. So it means that it's death applied to expansion from the mother, a product of conception, irrespective of the duration of the pregnancy. So that defines the fetal death. Okay, so when the fetus is separating from the mother, it does not breathe or show any other evidence of life, like a beating of the heart, pulsation of the umbilical cord, or even movement which is voluntary. So that one, it is actually regarded as a fetal death, or sometimes it is called stillbirth. Okay, stillbirth. Sometimes witimaicha kuti stillbirth. Deri muntu yotani anamalira. So we actually call them as stillbirth. Okay. And normally, sometimes this can be recognized in Africa by asking the mother to say, when the child was dying, was he crying? I mean, when the child was born, was he crying? If they say no, sanalire, then we actually call that one as stillbirth. And wakanati walira muja, then we actually call that one as live birth. So that's the way we classify them. So that's the way we classify them. So I want us now to look at some calculations pertaining to this, especially when we are looking at these mortality estimates, and we should be able to actually have some calculations to define the processes that we have, I think, in the next class. But for now, I think we'll stop there and continue later because of the saving challenges. Thank you.